Hi, in the second part of the lecture, let's discuss about how blood flows through the heart and the cardiac cycle. So, blood enters. So, the start of the blood flow, we have the entrance of the blood through the right atrium from the superior and the inferior vena cava and the cardiac cycles. So, the blood then drops to the tricuspid under ventricular valve into the right ventricle, which pumps the blood to the pulmonary valve into the trunk and the lungs. So actually, it's better to just look at this one in this illustration. So this is your cardiac cycle. So the movement here, you have the blood enters. This is the vena cava, superior and inferior vena cava, and this is your right atrium. So it enters from the vena cava to the right atrium, and then the right atrium pushes it to the right ventricle, and then the right ventricle pushes the blood to the lungs through the pulmonary veins, and then from the lungs it will go back through the pulmonary artery. This is the pulmonary artery, and then that delivers the oxygen depleted blood. Again, this is the blue one. The blue color indicates oxygen depleted blood. So we have the oxygen depleted blood from the right ventricle that is pushed to the lungs, and then from the lungs where it is reloaded with oxygen. So you have oxygen rich blood coming into the left atrium and then down to the left ventricle, which then pushes the blood out to the rest of the body through the aorta. So basically, that is your blood flow. That's how blood flow. So it's two cycles, because basically you have the pulmonary cycle involving here. So oxygen depleted blood coming in from the rest of the body to the heart and then down to the lungs, and then from the lungs another cycle. We have from the lungs to the heart and to the rest of the body. So that is your basically the flow of the blood. So for the cardiac cycle, so we start with a relaxation step. So it's completely relaxed. So during this relaxation step, blood enters the heart. Blood enters the heart in the specifically in the atrium. So both atrium receives the blood in this diastole or relaxation period. And afterwards, we have the atrial systole. So the atrium first contracts. So when the two atria, both left and right here, contracts, it pushes the blood to the ventricles. And then the next one, the ventricular systole. As you can see, this time the atrium is relaxed, but the ventricles contract. So you have your blood that is pushed out of the heart. Okay, and then back to the diastole. So it relaxes then, where blood will resume, or rather, where allowing the blood to enter the heart. So that is your cardiac cycle. So at the beginning of this cycle, the heart is in diastole, where the ventricles have relaxed and their recent contraction and their volume is increased. So diastolic pressure is the force that blood exerts on the walls of the closed circulatory system, while the heart is in a complete diastole or relaxation. And then when we have after the diastolic step, we have the atrial systolic step. The two atria then undergo systole and force the remaining atrial blood into the ventricles. So the systolic pressure measures of the force of the left ventricle, which pushes the blood through the circulatory system, and the ventricles contract while the atria relaxes. So after the very brief ventricular contraction, the heart then relaxes. So the pressure, the prevailing pressure is from the contraction of the ventricle. So it's the more greater force. So the force generated by the left ventricle generates the pulse that we can feel and the blood pressure that is measured at the doctor's office. So it's not the atrial systole but the ventricular systole. So the high blood pressure is loosely defined as the blood pressure reading of 140/90 and above. So this is systole over diastole. And when we talk about systole, it's the ventricular systole. So that is for the flow of the blood. How about the control? So what controls the beating of the heart? So unlike other muscle cells, because again the heart, the myocardium, myo means muscle, so heart is technically a muscle. But unlike other muscles, the cardiac muscles undergo rhythmic contractions without receiving nerve impulses. So it beats without a directive from the nervous system. So intrinsic controls establish the usual day in, day out pace of heartbeats. So we have a conduction system in the heart. So because again, these are muscles. Muscle tissues require electrical impulse to actually contract. And what caused those electrical impulse? We have the two nodes, the SA, sinoatrial node, which is the group of cells in the upper wall of the right atrium. So this is the heart's pacemaker. And it spontaneously creates action potentials that trigger the atria to contract. And we have the AV node, or arterioventricular node, which is the group of cells at the base of the left atrium, near the ventricle, and holds the wave of depolarization until the atria are the ones contracting. So basically, we start the signal starts from the SA node down to the AV node, and then from the AV node, it will fire the depolarization to the AV bundle, and the AV bundle will take the impulse to the right and left bundle branches that travel to the interventricular septum. So the bundle branches triggers the Purkinje fibers that contract the ventricles. So that is for the intrinsic control. Later, we have an illustration for that. Now, looking at the extrinsic control. So you have extrinsic control that modulates the baseline rate to meet the body's immediate demands. So this may override the intrinsic control. So example for that, when the heartbeat requires it's either homeostatic control or basically emotions, fight or flight response. So you have a necessary increase or decrease in the heart rate. So these extrinsic controls are usually directives from the nervous system. Although the nervous system does not always control the heartbeat, the nervous system can influence the rate of the heartbeat. So this is the intrinsic control of the system, and rather the intrinsic control of the heartbeat. So we call it the conduction system of the heart. So here are your nodes: the SA node, which is the pacemaker, and your AV node. Now, so you have the contraction impulse starting at the SA node, and then it will receive the AV node will receive that signal and passes it on to your this is your AV bundle. So you have the AV bundle, and then it will branch out both for the left and the right. Sorry, this is the right and the left ventricles. So these are the bundle branches, and it will pass the signal. It's electrical. The signal here is electrical in origin. So the electrical signal passes from the bundles, the left and right bundles, to the Purkinje fibers. So the Purkinje fibers are the ones that tells the muscles in the ventricles to contract. So those are your this is the conduction system of your heart. So the conduction system is also, or rather the contraction, this conduction system also helps generate your ECG, the iconic ECG waveform. This ECG, or electrocardiogram, is basically a machine that monitors the electrical conduction system in the heart. So we have the cells in the myocardium depolarize before they contract, and they repolarize as they relax and can be detected through the skin. So the waveform here, looking at it closely, so we have several, or rather we actually label each waveform. So I have the P wave, the Q wave, or rather QRS wave complex, and your T wave. So what are those? So the P wave is the signal detected when the SA node fires, causing atrial cell depolarization. So this is when we have atrial cell depolarization. As you can see here, it's the P wave starts basically, or rather the atrial systole or the atrial contraction starts at the middle of the P wave. So basically you have this is the signal, and of course the muscle contraction follows after the signal. So the P wave. And then you have the QRS complex created by the simultaneous depolarization of the ventricular cells. So the QRS waveform is basically a more, it looks a bit of a complex waveform, but here you will see it signals the triggering of the ventricular systole, the contraction of the ventricles. And then you have the T wave. As the ventricles relax and repolarize, making the return to the diastole. So the T wave here is the repolarization or the diastole. So repolarization of the heart. So you will have a relaxation period after your T wave. So the PR interval, P and R, it's from atrial depolarization to ventricular depolarization. And you have the QT, Q and T interval, total time of ventricular contraction and relaxation. So, the doctors can actually help diagnose specific heart diseases by looking at this electrocardiogram. So, for example, if you are missing your P wave, you have the occurrence of this one, rather your relaxation step is too short, whether these are bunched together, so on and so forth. So it indicates problems with the heart. So that is for the heart. So in the next part of this lecture, we'll discuss about different blood vessels, which is basically the plumbing of our system.